A pioneer at the intersection of enterprise technology and artificial intelligence, Vishal Sikka has consistently been ahead of the curve on how AI will reshape business models, productivity, and human potential. As the former CEO of Infosys and now founder and CEO of Vian Systems, he has long argued that AI is not just a tool, but a foundational shift in how enterprises operate, decide, and create value. At a time when Gen AI is triggering both excitement and anxiety, especially for India's $50+ billion IT services industry, questions are being raised about disruption, displacement, and the very future of the traditional outsourcing model. So, is this truly an existential moment or just another reinvention cycle for Indian AI? Joining me today, Aisha Faridi on the interview to decode this inflection point and what lies beyond it is Vishal Sikka himself. Vishal, great to have you on ET Now. Thank you so much for your time. I want to first talk about the big picture, Vishal, AI versus IT services. Is Gen AI an existential threat, you think, to Indian IT services model or just its next evolution phase?
Aisha, I think it can be both. It is clearly, there is a tremendous opportunity. You know, as an entrepreneur, I look at it from an opportunity point of view. I see unbelievable opportunity to reimagine industries, to reimagine processes and how we build things, and to do things that are unprecedented. I mean, if you just look at what AlphaFold did with the 200 million proteins, at the normal way of doing things, it would have taken humanity hundreds of millions of years to find those 200 million proteins, which we basically found, you know, within a few months of work. So there are unprecedented things that are waiting to be done. Also in the enterprises, reimagining the way we talk to customers, the way we build product, the way we run our business, and so on. On the other hand, if we look from the point of view of the way we have done things before, there is also no doubt that AI is incredibly disruptive to the services that we provide today. This can be done with a far, far smaller number of people, far more efficiently, you know, already today. So this is not, you know, I used to say this 10 years ago, etc. This is now here in the here and now. So both of these are possible.
But, you know, we're seeing this death of IT services narrative emerge again. Does this feel like deja vu from past tech cycles?
I think if you look at over the last 50 years, the IT services industry has faced many changes. You know, the web came, Y2K, package applications, Java, mobile. And every time we manage to transition the bulk of work from a previous way of doing things to a new way of doing things. That has always happened over the last 50 years. There are certain things different about it this time, though. One is the speed at which things are happening. If you just look over the last 6 months, how models have evolved and the ability to, you know, construct families of agents or swarms of agents and ask them to do things. So one is the speed. The second is that the nature of the work itself, this is basically it is doing informational work. It is doing, you know, the so-called white collar work or coding, executing processes, things like that, which is at the heart of the services industry. So there are certain differences. But again, the fundamental equation is still the same. If we manage to, you know, to transition ourselves, to transform ourselves fast enough to make AI a tailwind for ourselves, then this will be yet another reinvention example that we will be able to give looking backwards. But on the other hand, if we try to hold on to the way things were, then this will be the end of the current way of doing things. That is for sure.
But, you know, I want to talk about the point, Vishal, that you were earlier making, disruption versus opportunity, because that's the nature of the beast, technology, right? And you see this play out in every cycle. In the near term, are we clearly in a phase of AI-led cannibalization of revenues for IT firms?
Both. I see both, Aisha. Clearly, there is going to be a economic decline in the traditional projects, the traditional kinds of services. We are already seeing that. But at the same time, enterprises are absolutely hungry for advice on AI. I mean, I cannot provide this fast enough. There are too many enterprises who look for advice on what to do. Last night, at a similar time, I was speaking to another enterprise also in India, and they are desperate for advice on how do we bring AI in and so on. So I see both of these realities happening simultaneously, and what I don't see is that is the answer to the question: are we going to be able to transform fast enough to meet that demand, to rise to that demand?
But do you believe this disruption ultimately expands the total addressable market also in some way? You know, some are estimating that $300 billion to $400 billion by 2030 could be the opportunity.
For sure, for sure. But the question again is who will deliver that? Who will serve that need? And will we be able to provide the skills, the capabilities, the economics, the business model fast enough? You know, you cannot say anymore that, oh, these 20 people are going to come and do this work, when 2 people with the help of a bunch of agents can do that work. So all of a sudden you have to deal with the fact that there has been this dramatic compression in the work that was being done on the traditional business model, and so you have to somehow also deal with that. So it is I am an entrepreneur and I am thinking about this from the point of view of building from scratch, and so we see this as a full opportunity. But for companies that have a large legacy to uphold, you can see why this is not a straightforward thing.
So you don't think IT services in the here and now as we know them today can win the race yet?
I think in the next few years, we will see the ones who make the transition and have come out on the other side of this successful, and the rest of them will not make it. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in light of all this.
Yeah, quite interesting. But tell me, what is the real inflection point, Vishal, where AI stops hurting revenues and starts accelerating them for IT services here in India?
I think new kinds of problems. So I'll give you one example. I have one of my customers of my company, Vian. It's a company in the Middle East. It's a distributor of home goods. And recently, one of the big FMCG companies, CPG companies, one of the giant global CPG giants, decided to shut down their operation in one of the countries where my customer operates. And they used our product. They used our product to do very complex analysis, what-if analysis, scenarios, simulations, asking questions like if the price of this goes up that much, and because now all of a sudden you don't have the factories locally, so you have to import these under tariffs and the import cost, the logistics, all these complex scenarios they started to run. And they asked us for some advice on it, and we were shocked by the complexity of the questions they were running on the system. And then a few weeks later, he joined one of my customer events, and he was presenting to our prospects. And he said that they decided to shut down their operation in that country as a result of the analysis they did on my product. And I was shocked to hear that. I said, wow, you actually got out of that country? And he said, yeah. And I asked him, how long would it have taken you to do this normally before AI? And he said it would have taken 1 year. Imagine to be able to do in the space of 2-3 days. And he said, we ran a few hundred scenarios on Gila, on my product. There was no way we could make this profitable in that country anymore. We told our board, we presented to the board, we had a bunch of discussion, and then we decided to get out. And normally they would have done it, he said, at the end of 1 quarter, you would have seen that things are not working. Then you would put in some kind of a task force. Then you see again a second quarter. By the time you realize that this is not working, a whole year has gone by. Instead, you do this now in a matter of 2-3 days. So I think there are so many examples. I was reading about this guy in Australia who made a personalized mRNA vaccine for cancer for his dog by using these tools. So I think the point here, Aisha, is that people who understand how to use AI in an AI native way get an astonishing effectiveness, get a really dramatic productivity gain, and are able to do things that we simply could not do before. And the value of that is enormous. On the other hand, if you try to do the previous generation projects in the previous generation ways, these are obsolete now. And so how soon can you get out of that and start offering the new kinds of things? How soon can we develop the imagination to do the new kinds of things? How soon can we develop the economics to do the new kinds of things, to reach the buyers? All of this has to be done in a hurry, otherwise they are not going to make it.
I want to talk about the business model shift as well, because we're in that very unique transition phase. The traditional model has always been headcount-led growth for IT services. So are we now moving decisively to an outcome-based pricing model instead? And then what happens to the headcount loss that we will surely have?
The second question, the headcount, what happens to the headcount loss? This we have to see. Time will tell. If you look at historically, automation does lead to a lower number of jobs, but then the jobs somehow take care of themselves as long as we skill the people, as long as we are able to provide the right skilling. And people classically give the example of the number of COBOL programmers in the world, or for example in agriculture. Even if you look in India or look here in the US, the number of people who used to work in agriculture at the turn of the previous century was more than 95% of the economy was agri-centric. And now less than 1% of the people work in agriculture. So you have gone from 95% of the economy in agriculture to less than 1% in agriculture. And yet there is no shortage of food. In fact, there is so much surplus that we have an obesity problem. GLP-1s are so popular and things like that. And so there is always this, has been this kind of a creative destruction that we see in the world. Will that happen in this situation, or will we create a permanent class of people who never find a job? This time has to tell. But it is very clear to me, and in my discussions with our government at the India AI Summit and elsewhere, it is very clear that the government is absolutely committed to creating the skills, and it is at heart a skilling issue. I mean, right now we are in a situation where maybe there are 3,000 people in the world who could build a foundation model. But now I forgot your other question, the first question that you had.
I was just wanting to understand if we are decisively moving towards an outcome-based pricing model, yes, as opposed to headcount-led growth.
Yeah, some other way beyond the time and materials has to be done. This was also what I used to argue, 10 years ago or so. Whether it is outcome-based or sharing in the outcomes or creating some other kind of value through a combination of AI and people, all of these have to be now quickly worked out with, and creating win-win situations with our customers. I think this is what has to be done.
But Vishal, if revenue decouples from headcount, will fewer engineers be needed, or just a completely different kind of engineers from where you look at it right now?
Certainly fewer people. And I think, is there enough to be done? I am a great fan of David Deutsch's work he wrote a beautiful book called The Beginning of Infinity. I think our brains are sort of programmed by nature to look at the present in terms of the past that brought us here. But in reality, that doesn't have to be the case. Our history tells us that the future actually is infinite, and it can be constructed out of whatever our imagination can bring. And so I think, is there enough in the future to employ, hundreds of millions of people? Absolutely. Are we going to end up in a situation where we have a lot of entrepreneurs? If you look at the Prime Minister's call to action, it is about entrepreneurship. It is about creativity. So I think that AI enables a massive creativity. My wife Vandana, she has been working on a beautiful application to sort of nurture and bring out the entrepreneur in all of us, and she will hopefully soon talk about that to the world. And it is, I think that AI will create a culture of entrepreneurship, of a lot of us taking sort of control of our own destiny. I was reading about this Israeli kid who built a startup that Wix acquired. But he was just by himself, and he had several 100,000 users. And within 6 months, this one-person company was able to do something fantastic. So we will see more and more examples like that. Will the future have enough work for several billion people? I think so. I think so. But what the nature of that work will be, we don't quite know yet. But it is also very clear that individuals can do astonishing things. One of my friends, we were students together at Stanford, PhD students, and he was telling me that he runs this quite elaborate website that he had built. And recently, when he switched employers, he rebuilt that service, that site. Earlier, it was done by 15 great engineers over 9 months. He rebuilt this whole site by himself in 14 days. Imagine going from 15 people 9 months to one person in 14 days. Of course, this guy, he's a genius, and he already knew what version 1 was, so he was going from version 1 to version 2, even though he added new things in that. It wasn't just a redoing of the previous one. But my goodness, that's a more than 200 times productivity gain. So there are all these incredible examples of what people are able to do with AI. There is no doubt that the units of work that we had before, these can be done with much, much smaller human effort now, and much more of AI doing that. This is already the case now, so this is not some distant future. But that is a different thing than saying that will we have enough work for people in the future, and what is the nature of that work going to be? Who are the hosts of that? What industry is that going to look like? These are all some really exciting questions for the future that we still have in front of us.
But tell me, Vishal, I completely understand, and I get your point about how it increases productivity in no time and no expense, more importantly. Most of it is free as of now, at least. But how difficult is it going to be for large enterprises to rip and replace legacy systems, more B2B adoption rather than just consumer AI as we know it right now?
Oh, it is not easy. I have in the past I have used the example of mangrove forests that enterprises are. I mean, some of these enterprises are hundreds of years old. And so they are like civilizations. So they have incredible complexity inside their systems and so on. But that is the opportunity, right? That transformation of that landscape, evolution of that landscape towards this. What is possible now with AI, conversational, agentic work, that is an opportunity. That's a massive opportunity to do this kind of transformation, but with new economics, with the AI economics, the AI native way of working, not with the armies of people showing up and 10-year projects and this kind of thing. And so I think that enterprises need that done. This is something that needs to be offered in a new category, in a new kind of a way. This is a huge opportunity. And similarly, on the basis of that renewed platform, I used to call this renew and new, that renewing the existing stuff and then on top delivering the unprecedented new things. So definitely there is that opportunity. There's no doubt.
But Vishal, tell me, and purely from an investor perspective here, we're seeing the IT stocks here in India getting completely thrashed. Do you think markets are sort of overpricing disruption and underpricing adaptation? I mean, these are companies which have existed, like you said, they're like mangroves. They will be able to adapt in due course, and agility is the name of the game for any business. Forget Indian IT services?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how the market thinks about all this. Maybe the market is sort of weighed on the side that they will not be able to change in time. Who knows? The market has a wisdom of its own. But I think time will tell. But clearly, if they don't adapt, if they don't make this change, then they will not make it. This is for sure. And you will start to see that in the form of the decline in profitability to start with, and over time decline in revenue. And if you see these indicators, then because if you continue to renew the existing projects on the existing terms, some of those the customers will simply not renew, meaning they will not continue with those anymore. Some of those they will ask for new economics, which are going to be very difficult to deliver unless you are able to bring AI in a new kind of a business model. And so the question is, what percentage of the existing work is going to get disrupted that way? And I think in the next 2, 3, 4 quarters, we will start to see examples of this. At the same time, if you start to see companies demonstrating thousands of new efforts around new kinds of transformational work using AI, then you see that, actually there is a growth opportunity here. And, so it is definitely I don't know how the market is seeing this, but very soon it will be clear whether the transition is happening or not.
Right. So what must Indian IT companies do right now to stay relevant? Build platforms, own IPs, double down on services, plus AI integration. What piece in the puzzle can they start off with?
Skill as many people as possible in the new ways, using AI, using agentic work, offer new services in the new economics, new business models, and build that as fast as possible. Assuming that there is no tomorrow. I think if you do these 3 things, I think you come out okay.
So Vishal, if you were leading a large Indian IT firm today, what is the one bold pivot you would make immediately?
I am very happy doing what I am doing, Aisha. I think I'm an entrepreneur. The thing that I see is that there is a sense in India, in some parts of India, that, the AI train has left us. And I think this is nonsense. I think that a lot of the work in AI is still in front of us. You see the work that the team at Sarvam has done, or at some of the other companies that were showcased last month in Delhi. I think that is great. But if you just look at AI, the state of AI itself, the LLMs today, they hallucinate. Agentic work, my son and I wrote a paper on this. The hallucination problem is, even though they have become much better at it, there is still a very fundamental foundational issue in LLM technology, which is hallucinations. LLMs don't understand worlds so far. There is a whole body of work happening in world models. The energy consumption you mentioned, how soon can we make this accessible to people? The energy problem, the power consumption of AI is still a very big issue. And there is going to be dramatic improvements in that in the time to come. The applications on top of AI that people we still have a tremendous deficit of great applications on top of AI. This is part of why people think there is a bubble here, is because there are not enough applications that people have made that enterprises or even consumers are using. So I think all of these advances in AI will happen in the time to come. And so, I would bet on those and bet on the future, and then go after this as fast as possible.
So if a young entrepreneur from India had to come to you today for advice on where does he begin in the AI, entrepreneurial journey, what would be the advice to him? Where do you sense the biggest opportunity right now?
Learn about AI and offer great applications of it, to people. There is a tremendous need for this. Amazing new things that can be done using AI. And those people who want to work on AI itself, then look into the future over the next how AI is going to evolve over the next 10, 20 years, robotics, physical models, energy efficiency, all of these kinds of areas in ways in which AI will improve. I think, that is something that people can focus on. So both on the applications on top of the current AI, as well as working on the future of AI itself, both of these are enormous areas of growth. And then the third one is entrepreneurship. Like, I think this is a great opportunity, a great time for people to, do incredible things using AI. This is what I mentioned, Vandana, my wife, is working on, is how do you support the grassroots entrepreneurs. So I see from that point of view a tremendously positive future in front.
Okay, great. And I look forward to speaking to Vandana as well once she's ready with her launch. But great learning today. Good speaking with you, Vishal.
Thanks so much, Aisha.
Thanks.
Great to talk to you.